שבוע. מופיע 3 פעמים המושג תרומה. א', וייחו לי תרומה, ב', אשר ידענו לב. מה זה?
So, at the beginning of our parsha, Parshas Terumah, we have 3 instances of the word Terumah. They should give, donate. ויקחו לי תרומה, they should take from me a donation. אשר ידבנו ליבו תיקחו את תרומתי. Anybody whose heart is overflowing and wants to give, from him you shall take my donation. וזאת התרומה אשר תיקחו מאיתם, and this is the donation you should take from them. זהב וכסף ונחושת. Gold, silver, and copper. And it's a big question. How do you translate nechoshet? Should it be copper or any of the alloys of copper, such as brass or what's the other one?
I don't think they were doing that.
Yes, they were most definitely. It's very hard to create anything just out of copper. You have to add some other metal. In any case, הגמרא אומרת ביחס הזה ששלוש תרומות הן תרומת בקע לגולגולת שנעשו מהם מעדנים, תרומת המזבח בקע לגולגולת, לקופות, לקנות מהם קורבנות ציבור, תרומת המשכן נדבת כל אחד ואחד. So the Gemara says in Shkalim that the donations were divided into 3 categories. Because it says 3 times to donate. Beka legulgolet means that every person gave half a shekel. Every male over the age of 20 gave half a shekel. And from that was silver. That was made out of silver. These were silver coins. So from that they made the bases of the planks. The tabernacle was made out of planks that were 10 cubits high and 1.5 cubits wide, and at the end there was a little protrusion from the wood. It was wood that was covered with gold. It was plated with gold. And the end of the plank fit into a base that held it. And that's how the bases stood up in the desert. Meaning how the walls of the tabernacle stood up. And then on top, there were things that connected them one to another. But on the bottom, they weren't connected one to another. And then the silver was also used, the half shekel was also used to buy the communal sacrifices. Trumat HaMishkan, nidvat kol echad v'echad. And what was used to build the tabernacle was what every person wanted. So you see here that the half shekel, which was mandated, you had to bring it. You had to bring half a shekel. It's still called a donation, but it was set exactly what the amount was, and for each person. That went into the communal sacrifices and into making the bases of the planks. And everything else was used to construct the tabernacle. אך קיים הבדל בין התרומות. התרומות שנוצלו לקורבנות ולעדנים היו בקע לגולגולת, מחצית של שקל כל אחד במידה שווה, ואילו התרומה למשכן וכליו לא הייתה בסכום קבוע, כי אם כפי רצונו של כל אחד. That's what we just said. Okay? יש איפה להבין מדוע שונות תרומת הקורבנות ותרומת העדנים מן התרומה לשאר צורכי המשכן. It says, why is there a difference between the communal sacrifices and the bases, specifically the bases of the planks, and everything else which was done however each person wanted? There was no criteria that you had to meet. You could bring anything, basically, from these 13 or 15 types of materials that they needed for constructing the temple. So we have one that's completely open-ended, which is the building of the tabernacle. That's completely open-ended. You can bring whatever you want from the materials that are needed. And you have these 2 things, the communal sacrifices and the bases, which have to come from the half shekel silver coins. העובדה שתרומת המזבח...
2 marks is a shekel or 3 marks?
What?
What did they give?
1.
2?
1 was used for everything. העובדה שתרומת המזבח היא בקע לגולגולת מכל אחד במידה שווה, מובנת. The fact that the communal sacrifices were equally divided amongst everybody, that makes sense. That's easy to understand. Because it's a communal sacrifice, right? שתרומת המזבח נועדה לכפר על נפשותיכם. The purpose of all the communal sacrifices is to atone for the people's souls, for their psyches. בהתאם לפירוש רש"י על פסוק זה שהוא מוסב על תרומת המזבח לקנות בהם קורבנות ציבור, שהקורבנות לכפרה הם באים. כלומר לכפרה על חטא העגל כאמור בירושלמי במדרש. And if you would ask what communal problem that they have already that they needed to atone for, so the answer is that they needed to atone for the sin of the golden calf. So for that, to atone for that, they all needed to bring the same amount. Why? כי חטא העגל היה חטא כללי. The sin of the golden calf was a communal sin. Everybody was affected by it. שבגם לא רק באלה שנטלו בחלק. It didn't affect only those who took part in making the golden calf and worshipping it. כי אם גם בשבט לוי שלא השתתף בחטא. It even affected the Levites who did not partake in the sin. ואפילו משה רבינו, שאף לא היה בשעת מעשה באותן ד' אמות, שלא היה אף בכלל מי שיש בידו למחות, פגע בו בכל זאת החטא, ככתוב, לך רד ופרש רש"י, רד מגדולתך. Even Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't there, and he couldn't even voice his opposition. He also was affected, because God told him, go down from your stature. Meaning not just go down from the mountain, but go down from your stature. Everybody was affected. מאחר שחטא העגל היה דבר בו נכשל כלל ישראל כשלמות של כלל, ופירושו של דבר שהקלקול היה כללי, היה צריך לכן גם התיקון הכפרה לבוא באמצעות עניין כללי בנתינה שהוטלה במידה שווה לכל ישראל, משום שהיה זה עניין של כלל ישראל. So the entire people had to partake in atoning for this sin. And everybody partook in an equal amount. להבהרת הדברים, to clarify this a little bit more, ידוע שחטא העגל הוא מסוג חטא עץ הדת. The sin of the golden calf is of the same type of sin as eating from the tree of knowledge. What does that mean? It means that in every generation, we continue to suffer from it. But it also causes the same type of problem. בחטא עץ הדעת ירדה זוהמה לעולם. When Adam ate from the tree of knowledge, a blemish came down to the world. Zuhama is something disgusting. It's something dirty. So I'm calling it a blemish, but something negative, very negative, came down into the world. ובשעת מתן תורה פסקה זו מתן. And when the Torah was being given, it was removed from the world. It was removed from the people. And basically, this is what causes two things. It causes the person to be crass, to have what we call a skin of a snake, meaning that his character traits, to begin with, need to be refined. Nobody's born, or almost nobody's born, without a negative, egotistic take to him. Right? His character is based on his ego, and that needs to be refined. And the other thing is that because of this, we all have death. We all die because of this blemish. ועל ידי חטא העגל חזרה, and when they worshipped the golden calf, that blemish came back down into the world. They brought it back down. מובן איפה שאפשר להבין ביתר בהירות את עניין חטא העגל על ידי התעמקות במהותו של חטא עץ הדת ובתוכן מתן תורה. So it's clear from here that we can understand the sin of the golden calf better if we understand the sin of eating from the tree of knowledge. מהתחלת הבריאה היה העולם על מילואו נברא. When God created the world, it was in a complete state, in a perfect state, one would say. That's what they call a paradise. They call it paradise. Why do they call it paradise? Because it was, that's the real reason, but they call it paradise, and in people's minds, paradise means a perfect bliss, right? Some kind of blissful state. ועיקר שכינה בתחתונים הייתה. And divine presence, God's presence, was mainly in the mundane, here below. It was felt in the mundane. על ידי חטא עץ הדת ירדה זוהמה לעולם, משום כך לא היה העולם כלי לאלוקות בהתגלות. But when this blemish came down because of the sin of the tree of knowledge, so then the world stopped being a vessel for godliness, for revealing godliness. It doesn't mean that the godliness is gone, it just means it can't be revealed. And that was because of that sin. ידוע הרי שלמרות שקיימו אבות כל התורה עד שלא ניתנה, לא היה הדבר קשור בחומר הגשמי של העולם באופן פנימי. One of the signs of this is that even though the patriarchs and their children, they performed all the mitzvahs of the Torah, all the commandments of the Torah, they were not able to connect what they were doing to the physical aspect, or at least the inner physical aspect of the world. Meaning, they did things in the physical. Like Yaakov took a stick and he carved it. But it didn't have kedusha, it didn't have holiness. So even though this stick was the same action in a sense, as putting tefillin on, it didn't have the holiness that we have today when we make tefillin. What the blemish caused, the blemish of eating from the tree of knowledge, was that the spiritual and the physical were distant from one another. There was no way to bridge between them. And spirituality had no way of being expressed and even taken in completely by the physical aspect of reality. It couldn't become a vessel for godliness. So the sin of the golden calf awakened again the same blemish in the structure of the world.
There was a difference. Because now you can't take skin of sin and make it into.
That's only because we received the Torah.
Right. So
Before the Torah, there was no way to do this.
okay, so there's still a difference because it didn't wipe that out.
It did. Wait, hold on. Hold on. Not that simple. They had not yet received the Torah. So, even without the Torah, it already would have been that there would have been a state in which everything that you do could have revealed godliness, like it was in the Garden of Eden. And that they pushed away. And then the Torah comes down and is like a new beginning for that. But it's done in a completely different way. With the Torah, as we'll see, you have to work hard to make it happen. Reality is not conducive to it yet. But Torah gives you the possibility of bringing the holiness into a vessel, but not into every vessel. But you have to understand, at Matan Torah, at the giving of the Torah, before the Torah itself was given, before the laws were given, how to do things, they were already in a state in which everything that you did would have reflected godliness. And it didn't matter what it was. It was the same state that Adam was in. That everything that he would have done in the Garden of Eden would have been a commandment. It would be what we call B'chol D'rachecha De'el. That in all your ways you know Him. You know God. יתרונו של מתן תורה נשאר קיים ודאי גם לאחר חטא העגל. He just says that. The benefit of the giving of the Torah being actually given, did remain after the sin of the calf. שהרי גם עתה קיים שוני בין יהודי לבין להבדיל לא יהודי. Because even now we see that there are gradations, there are levels. There's a difference between a Jew and a non-Jew. A non-Jew is not able to bring godliness down the same way because he doesn't have the same commandments. And a Jew is able to. בישראל נשארו קיימות תורה ומצוות בגשמיות גם עתה. And we still have Torah and mitzvahs. We're still able, through performing commandments, to bring godliness into the world to some extent. Again, not to bring it in, but to have it revealed. כשמטרתן לחבר ולאחד את הגשמיות עם האלוקות. There's a lot of mistakes in this. I don't know if you noticed. There's a lot of typing typos. אלא שבכל זאת חזרה במידה מסוימת הזוהמה ולא רק לגבי אנשים פרטיים ועניינים פרטיים, כי אם גם בכללות העולם. So, even though, like we just explained, even though, as we just said, there is still the possibility of connecting the spiritual with the physical through performing the Torah's commandments, it is not at the same state that it was, because the blemish did come back. And the blemish affects both private individuals and the general state of the world. Because it makes it, like we said, it makes it a lot harder. And it's not in everything. It's only in the particular things that the Torah prescribes. התיקון לחטא העגל הוא במחצית השקל, שלגביה נאמר זה ייתנו. זה מלשון התגלות. So he says here, so the idea behind the half silver coin for making up for the atoning for the sin of the golden calf is that it says ze yitnu, this they will give. And whenever you say this, we just saw this last week, or in Mishpatim, the same idea. This implies godliness. Remember we saw this? Al kol davar asher yomar hu ze. We saw there, hu ze, who's this? he'll say, this is godliness. We had this in the Mishpatim. We just started last week. I think it was on Thursday or Friday. Asher yomar ki hu zeh. He comes before the court and he says, this is it. What do you mean, this is it? So the Tzemach Tzedek says, this means, here is godliness. He's pointing at godliness. So here too it says, Zeh yitnu. This is what they will give. What do you mean, this is what they will give? Zeh milshon hitgalut. It's a revelation of godliness. כמאמר רז"ל, כל אחד ואחד מראה באצבעו ואומר, זה כלי. As the sages say about the verse, זה כלי וענווהו, that they said at the Song of the Sea, this is my God and I will adorn him. So this is pointing at Hashem. כלומר, על ידי מחצית השקל ועבודת הקורבנות ובזמננו, הרי זה על ידי עבודת התפילה, שבמקום קורבנות תקנו. So through the half shekel and the communal sacrifices that were bought from the half shekel, and in our times, since we don't have the sacrifices, we have prayer, okay? And especially the prayer that you come to daven in a minyan. מסירים את הזוהמה וממשיכים שוב גילוי אלוקות בעולם. They remove the blemish and they draw down again the revelation of godliness in the world. מכאן מובן שגם חטא העגל וגם תיקונו הם עניינים כלליים. So from this we learn that the sin of the golden calf and the atonement for it, they are general, meaning they're the same for everybody. Everybody brought half a shekel. Okay?
There was no tikkun olami, klali.
No.
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 Why not?
Why not? The closest is the Torah. The Torah is the closest that there is. The Torah is called Tal Tchiyah. The Torah is the dew of life, not just life, but of rejuvenation, and it comes to fix the state of the tree of knowledge. But it's not complete yet. It's not complete. It can only become complete when we reach a state where we can do the communal mitzvos. And the mitzvahs that we have today are only, we talked about this, there are only 270 out of 613. We're missing most of the mitzvahs, most of the commandments we can't perform because we don't have a temple.
Or a king.
The king is... Okay, so we have to end here, and tomorrow we'll continue. And this sichah is very interesting because it takes a long, long time to get to the second part. This is all achna'ah. This is all going to be submission. And he's going to go on for another page. How I marked it here. Where does he switch to separation? Yeah, it's only in section 12 here that he gets to the separation. It goes on for a long time. It's very, very interesting things here. Tomorrow we'll see a beautiful definition of what it means that something is communal. It's a beautiful definition. Okay. So we'll continue tomorrow.